parents with children, be sure to check out the Kids Church video online via the app or the website. There are so many ways to stay connected and get plugged in during this season. Be sure to check out the calendar to see what's happening, including daily devotionals, online life groups, prayer groups, and so much more.
When most people think about church, they think about a big building with a giant steeple on top. They think about their favorite pew and all the people they see inside. But when Jesus talked about church, he never talked about a building. So you can do church from your couch or from your home. You can do church with just one other person or all by yourself, because church was never ever about all that stuff. Being the church was all about God and bringing him to others. So we're going to continue to bring church to your kids by teaching about the life God has for them. We're going to continue to invest in your families and make sure that church is more than just a Sunday, but an everyday event. Because you see, we don't go to church here at AGIF. We are the church. Worship with us today.
Away the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness your loving kindness tore through the shadow of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy, where heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to bear my sin and bear my shame. The cross has spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me.
dear brothers and sisters. During this COVID-19 season, AGIF has indeed proven that the church is not the physical building. It is the family of God, all of us. I'm so proud to be part of a church that gave away 2 weeks of offering to our mission partners, even during this difficult time. Like many of you, I'm so grateful to God and to the faithfulness and creativity of our pastors and staff that we have so many online opportunities to grow spiritually together. From daily morning devotions, men's Bible study, prayer meetings, live group discussion groups, Sunday interactive service, and to even a marriage refresher class. Kindly join me today to give back to God, for He has given us so much, even His life.
Let me start by saying that I believe mothers should be respected, loved, honored, and cherished. Most certainly, they should be protected. Webster tells us that a mother is a female parent, one who gives birth. But for those of us with a good mom, we know them for even greater worth. She's the one who's always there, knowing just the right time to say yes. And even though hated, we see now that even the no was meant for our best. In times of heart, a mother's words captivates the heart, and even though we sometimes call it mommy magic, we see now that it was just grace and love as they help us through tragic times. But before we get swept away in a world of fairy tales and myths, let's pause and realize that Mother's Day for some is not a day of joy and bliss, but a day of mourning and great pain and suffering, and their heart is torn into tiny little pieces. For the divorced, abused, and suffering mother who struggles daily to provide for her child, or lost her child to a new mother who her hoped soulmate deemed a better mother. And she's been left alone, not fully settled into her role, as she instead always fought to protect her child. And what about the pain endured by those who could never have a baby, leading them to believe that God's love at best is a maybe? For all you ladies that long for the treasure of a new birth, may I speak life into your heart. It is your heart, not your womb, that is the measure of your worth. The emptiness you feel right now because there's no life within your womb can only be filled by the gospel, not a child, a job, or even a faithful, loving groom. And others of you who might be struggling because you bought the world's distortion, the pain you feel today is rooted in yesterday's abortion. Before we go any further, allow me to speak life where death may reign. Jesus' blood is sufficient to cleanse even the darkest sin's stain and to heal the soul's deepest pain. Draw from your past, but do not live there. For guilt and regret will turn your heart to stone, but look to the love of Jesus, a love that was shown on the cross for the whole world to see. And on that cross, Jesus commissioned his earthly mom with a very exciting task that changes hers and another's world. Behold your son, Mary. He spoke concerning the disciple for whom he has a special love. An adoption at a funeral. Something so beautiful it could only have been written from above. For all the moms who gained the status not from a hospital room, but rather in a courtroom, we praise God that you too, through adoption and fostering, answered the motherhood call. Because of you, a child has been reborn and been given hope and a future. And for the mom who inevitably gave their child up so they could have a chance at a better life than they could give them, I hope you feel peace in that, and that your child will always know you love them and forever will do. For the moms whom death has robbed your child, and you can no longer hold them in your arms, they are looking down from above and being thankful best. They had you for a mom, their forever angel. Thank you for the years of love and grace, and thank you for keeping them alive in your heart as they hold you even closer in theirs. For those whose life and not death has taken your child away from you because your love and affection was deliberately misconstrued for something other than, I want you to know that they know you love them and encourage you not to give up praying for them and holding them close to your heart. And finally, for those whose moms are no longer on this earth, we pray that today we find you cherishing the special moments with your mothers given to you by God. The lovely memories live on, and yes, the advice still stands. Moms, we stand in honor of you today. We thank you for all you've done. May you continue to mom well until you can no longer see the sun. May Jesus reignite your passion. May you pass it on before you leave the earth. May all the hearts and joys and pains of your story simply not be wasted, but may they from your memory be cut and on your children's hearts forever be pasted. Happy Mother's Day, moms. We truly value all your tendencies and yes, even your little quirks. But most of all, we thank you for modeling the truth that love truly works.
Mommy, we
We
love you. Mwah.
We love you, Mom. You're the best mommy I could dream of because whenever I'm in need, you help me. Thank you for letting us have a lot of people over and making delicious food for them and us. Our mother is special because she does everything for us. She cooks, she cleans, she sets up, she does everything. My mother's special because she cooks us food and plays with the whole lot. I love my mommy because she cooks for me. Thank you for letting us go to Disney a lot. And thank you for letting us have many sleepovers at our house. Because she gives me hugs. Mommy does everything for us. He cooks, he cleans, he buys me all the toys. Go to work and he makes money. My mom's special because we have special chats at night. Thank you for being my mom. I hope this will be the best for you. I hope you get lots of love from your children like me.
Hi, Mom. Hey, thank you so much for always being there for me and always making me smile. Love you so much. Have an amazing day.
We love you so much. Thank you for being the best mom we can ask for. Eat and have a great day and a great year.
Just want to say thank you so much for loving us and everyone else that's coming to your home, your church, your neighborhood, on the way, anywhere, anyone you meet. Thank you for always sharing words of love and encouragement.
Thank you, Mom, for being the best mom in the world now that I have kids of my own. Whew.
For teaching us to be joyful all the time. Thank you so much for leading and loving by example. I appreciate you, I love you, and I pray that God blesses you each and every day of your life.
I can't imagine. I mean, I know I was about as perfect of a child as there could be, but thank you for all that you did and all that you continue to do for me.
To my wife, Karen Morse, I'm sure that my children and I don't express often enough our appreciation for how wonderful Karen really is.
Thank you for always supporting me and seeing the best in me.
Thank you for two beautiful girls and being a great mom to them.
Happy Mother's Day!
Happy Mother's Day, Mom.
Happy Mother's Day, Mom.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day, Mom. Happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day, Mommy. Happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. Thanks for being awesome mums.
Have you ever been in love? Like head over heels in love? I'm going to tell you about a time that I fell in love, but this story actually isn't about Tiffany. It's a different story of when I fell in love. And the object of my love was something I couldn't get it out of my mind. I thought about it night and day, my love. And I remember I used to take my car and I would drive down the street where they lived and I would just hope to catch a glimpse. I pictured kids running around the yard. I pictured holidays together, Christmas and Easter. I pictured big Christmas tree together and celebrating together. I pictured all that our lives could be together. I remember other people had a connection with the one that I loved. They actually had a commitment, and I had to sit back and wait as one commitment after another came and went, and there was never the right time for me to come into the picture. And so I just waited, and I looked at it from afar, and I pictured and dreamed, and this happened for a long time until I finally could be with the one I loved. Now, the object of my love here was actually a house. It wasn't a girl or anything like that. It was a house. There was this house on this street. It was the perfect street, and right after having kids, Tiffany and I would see this one house on this one street and think about our lives there. We'd think about all of our kids growing up, and the thing about this house, though, was it was a foreclosure, which meant that the people who were supposed to take care of it were no longer taking care of it. They had abandoned the house for another house, actually. And as it was in the foreclosure process, people came in and put in commitments into this house, and then they kept pulling their contracts, and every time the value of the house would drop. And we would try to get in there first, but someone else would get in there, and then we'd have to wait, and then they would drop out, and we would try to get in there, and the value just kept dropping. But once we finally got into the house, we saw the house for what it was, and it was gross. The carpets, I had to rip up all the carpets because the carpets were pet stained and smelled, and it literally, the house stunk. The kitchen, the cabinets were a mess. Upstairs, it was so bad upstairs that even to get a loan, before we could move in, it had to rip up the bathroom upstairs, parts of the bathroom, because it was just such a mess. But I didn't care about any of that. When I saw this house, I saw all it had been and all it could be. I wanted to restore it beyond the condition it even had at the beginning. I wanted to make it new again. And so for hours and hours and days and weeks and months and years, I ripped up carpet and I cleaned the concrete underneath it because it was even bad. I leveled the floors. I ripped out all the cabinets in the kitchens. I put in new cabinets and new flooring. I went into the upstairs bathroom at one point, and a tile was loose, and I pulled the tile off, and it led to one tile after another being pulled off because as I pulled it off, I noticed there was more and more damage behind it. And I kept pulling tile after tile off, and soon the whole bathroom was untiled. And underneath the tile was rotten wood, and I then had to realize that the project was even bigger than I could handle, and I had other people come and help me because underneath what I thought was the problem was a deeper and deeper issue. But as we renovated, as we worked on this house, as we restored this house, we started to see all the house could be. And as we did project after project, the value of the house began to rise. It began to take shape. It began to be the place that we always dreamed it would be. And we loved living in that house. And when we sold that house, we sold it for so much more value than we bought it for because it was starting to show what it could be. And it was still never there, but it was such a fun process to be a part of, ripping it apart and seeing what was there, tearing it down, but then putting it back better than it had ever been before. Right now, actually, our sanctuary is under a similar process. Over at church, as we've been on this virus break, the sanctuary has been ripped apart and the pews have been pulled out, and as they continue to build, they start seeing the other issues that they have to fix and continue to work on. And when we come back, we're going to have this beautiful sanctuary, but it's slowly being pieced apart and taken apart and worked on and renovated. And as I renovate these houses and I think through this, I realize that those houses, the sanctuary, my house that I worked on, those places are like me. I am a work in progress. Actually, I'm worse than a work in progress. I'm a mess. I stink on the inside. I have been scarred and beaten up. And a lot of it, I can look to other people and say it's their fault. Maybe it's something my parents once said to me, even though they were great parents, but just a word here, a word there that threw me off. Maybe it was something a friend said to me and made fun of me one time, and it just set this blinders up in my heart that I always couldn't get over. I had times where girls hurt my heart, and I had times where friends hurt my heart. I had times where teachers told me I was stupid and wrote it down in paper and told me that I was nothing and I did not deserve what I was getting. I had times coaches cut me from teams and made me feel worthless, and I have these deep scars of what people have done in my life. But more than that, much more than that, is the scars I have done and the damage I've done inside. I have treated people so horribly. I've treated my parents like they didn't know what they were talking about when I was growing up. I treated my siblings so poorly. There's times where I'm very, very disappointed in the way I talk to my wife and talk to my kids. There's times where I am very disappointed with how I act at work and the shortcuts I take. There are times where my value feels so low, and as I'm sitting there and I try to work on these issues, it seems like there's more and deeper issues, some caused by others, some caused by me. And I just realize my value has sunk so low. My value is so tiny. And it hurts, and I feel abandoned and alone and like worthless at times. Because I know what's going on the inside of me, and it's not pretty. But I also know that I'm not the only one who's not pretty on the inside. I'm not the only one who other people have damaged. Maybe you were cheated on. Maybe you were called dumb yourself. Maybe you were called worse than dumb. Maybe your parents tore you down really bad and made you feel less than, made you feel horrible about yourself, and those scars and that baggage is still with you, and you're struggling to figure out how to make it better. Maybe the damage you have in you is because you've done something. Maybe you're the one who cheated on a spouse or cheated on a loved one. Maybe you cheated on your taxes recently. Maybe you cheated on a test. Perhaps life was too much and you did choices that you weren't proud of. Maybe your greed has gotten in the way. Maybe it wasn't a right time for a pregnancy and you ended that pregnancy. Maybe you have said things and done things to other people that have left them hurt, but it also adds scars to yourself. And you have devalued yourself and injured yourself. Whatever the case is, I know that I need renovation in my life. I need restoration. I need to be put back to something better than I ever was, because I was never that great in the first place. And I see it in my kids. I see it in my wife. I see it in myself. I see it in the people I work with. That everyone else also needs this restoration. What does restoration, though, look like? How do we get restored? How do we find a way of being valued and cared for and put and made into something we never even imagined being? Not just made new, but made right. Made the way that we were always meant to be. I'm going to walk us through the story of Peter. Peter was a guy who was a normal guy. He was a fisherman when Jesus showed up. And Jesus is that guy who's 100% man, 100% God. And when Jesus showed up in Peter's life, he was a normal guy just like everyone else. He was a fisherman. And Jesus told him to drop his nets and follow him. And Peter became one of the 12 disciples who followed Jesus around during his life. And we've been going through the book of John, and we're nearing the end. And at the end, there's this beautiful story about Peter. But it makes zero sense if we don't know the background of Peter. So I'm going to share some stories from the book of Matthew, actually, because John has the same stories, but without much more explaining, we're going to flip into the book of Matthew to look at a couple things that happened with Peter. And these come from Matthew chapter 26. It says, "Then Jesus told them," his disciples. So Jesus is sitting there with his disciples. He's hanging out. And Jesus says to them, "This very night you will fall away on account of me, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. He's saying, this very night, something's going to happen to me, and you guys are going to run away, my sheep. He called his disciples, his followers, his sheep a lot. So he said, something's going to happen, and you guys are going to run. You're going to be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you to Galilee. Peter replied, even if all fall away on account of you, I never will. I tell you the truth, Jesus answered. This very night, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. But Peter declared, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. And all the other disciples said the same thing. Peter didn't think he had a heart that needed restoration. He didn't think that he had anything wrong with him. He thought he was ready to follow Jesus. But Jesus said, you can't follow. You're not going to do it. You're going to deny me. And Peter said no. So then we look at the next story of Peter, and Jesus has now been arrested that night, and he's been taken away. And while Jesus is going through that, this is what happens to Peter. It says, now Peter was sitting out in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. You also were with Jesus of Galilee, she said. But he denied it before all of them. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Then he went out of the gateway. Another girl saw him and said to the people there, this fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth. He denied it again with an oath. I don't know the man. After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, surely you are one of them. Your accent gives you away. Then he began to call down curses on himself and swore to them, I don't know the man. Immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word of Jesus had spoken, before the rooster crows you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. At this moment, everything that Peter thought he was vanished. He thought he was a man who loved Jesus perfectly. And no matter what it would cost him, he was going to continue to love Jesus. He thought he was in no need of restoration in his relationship with Jesus because he thought he had that part of his life worked out. But he didn't. He wasn't as brave as he thought he was. He wasn't as sure as he thought he was. He wasn't the man he thought he was. And I don't know if you have ran into that recently where you realize you're not the person you thought you were. Your kids say something to you and you thought you were a good parent, and then you snap back at them with venom you didn't know you had in you. And like, ooh, maybe I'm not who I thought I was. Or an opportunity presents itself, but it makes you act a little shady, and you're thinking, oh, I can go ahead and take that opportunity, and I can cheat just a little bit. I can lie just a little bit. Maybe in a relationship where you're willing to betray someone to get yourself elevated, and you didn't even know you had that in you. At this moment, Peter didn't even know he had it in him, and it made him weep. Jesus goes on to be crucified after this. He dies. And he comes back and he sees his disciples after he comes back to life because he was 100% God. And so he comes back to life after dying for sins for everyone. And he showed up and they were out fishing and he was part of fishing. Remember, Peter was a fisherman, so it's almost calling back to when Jesus first called Peter. He was out fishing. And then they're cooking along a fire, which is where Peter denied Jesus. So it's almost full circle, right? There's fish involved, there's nets and fishing, there's a fire involved, which is where Peter denied Jesus. And Peter and Jesus have a conversation. And he says, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these? And he's talking about the other disciples. Do you love me more than them? And he uses a word called agape, which is perfect fatherly love. Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Peter responds and says, yes, I love you. You know that I love you. But he doesn't use the word agape, perfect love. He actually uses this other word, philios, which is more like brotherly love. It's a little bit more conditional. Peter thought at one point that he had this perfect love for Jesus, and I think he's realized that he didn't quite have that love, but he still has strong love for Jesus. And he says, yes, I love you. I love you deeply. Maybe not as perfectly as you love me, but I love you deeply. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Remember, sheep, lambs are what Jesus would refer to his followers as. Feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. So first he said, do you love me more than them? And he's like, yes, I love you. Then he says, okay, do you just love me perfectly at all? And he says, yes, I love you. And again, Jesus uses the perfect love word. And Peter actually uses a word that means brotherly love again. I love you the best I can. Not as good as you love me, but I love you the best I can. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? This time he actually used the same word Peter used in the brotherly love. So he's like, okay, you don't love me perfectly, but do you even love me the way you say you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus had asked him a third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. And then he goes on and describes in a very imagery type of way that Peter will one day die for his faith. And then he ends this up by saying, then Jesus said to him, follow me. Remember earlier he said you can't follow where I'm going, but now he's saying, follow me. You have been humbled, you've been refined, you've been restored. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. And Jesus came and asked him if he loved him 3 times. And that painful recognition at that moment around a fire, you know that Peter's mind went back to when he denied Jesus, when he wasn't enough, when he wasn't doing the right thing. His mind went back to that moment. Jesus didn't just gloss over Peter's denial of him. He didn't act like it didn't happen. He didn't see the worst part of him and say, you know what, we can just put paint over that. No one will notice. He did the hard thing. He made Peter confront the worst thing that Peter could have done, the denial of Jesus. He made Peter look straight into his shame and his hurt. He made Peter look at the worst part of himself and say, you know what? You are forgiven and made better. Because before, if I just said you're forgiven, you would feel like you were where you were before. But now guess what? I'm trusting you with my sheep. I'm not only making you what you were before, I'm giving you something more. I'm giving you my most precious thing, my people. Love them. Care for them. Take care of the lambs. Take care of the sheep. Take care of the little sheep. Take care of them all. He didn't just make him right, make him even. He made him ahead, and he said, I'm going to give you more. I don't see the value you even had in yourself. I see more value there. I see that you are going to go and be the person I build my church on. You're going to go and serve and do things. This restoration was painful for Peter. He got angry at Jesus asking him 3 times, and no doubt because he remembered what he had done. If you want Jesus to restore you, it's going to hurt because he's not going to shy away from the hard stuff. He's not going to look at you and act like everything's okay and all it takes is one little word. He knows that there's going to be something deeper that has to go on, a heart transformation. He needs to come in and clear out and change the layup of your heart. He needs to rip out everything and renovate it. And when he rips it out, you'll notice that your problems that you thought were your problems aren't your real problems. He'll peel back layer after layer after layer, and it will hurt. But it will be so good. So good. And he will give you more than you ever could have imagined for yourself. He'll value you more than you ever valued yourself. And a lot of you are coming in today at different places in your faith. Some of you are like, I don't even know if I believe in God. Well, I hope that you try God and you understand that God is the only way to make you into what you were always meant to be. And I hope you invite him in to start renovating that house of yours, that heart of yours, and let him move in and start doing the work that he's into. And you say, God, yes, please come change me, because he will come in. Some of you feel like you've already been renovated, that you've had God working on you, and I'll get back to you in a second. And some of you are noticing that you need more work done, because as God has been peeling back those layers, you notice, and you might want to stop it, and I encourage you to keep going. Keep going with God. Allow him to work through you and allow him to give you value. Now, to those people that think you're already renovated, that you're already restored, can I tell you that Peter's story didn't stop at the end of this story that I just read? Peter went on and he did great things and he worked really hard. But do you know that later on, the Bible records Paul, another disciple, another apostle that comes around later, Paul goes to Peter and says, you're doing your ministry a little wrong, and you need to adjust this. And they had a disagreement, and they argued about it. And Paul had to help Peter understand that even though he was already renovated, he still needed more work. The renovation's never complete. God is going to continue to work on you. We call that sanctification. He's going to continue to make you right, to make you better than you ever thought. And I'm asking you guys today, where and what in your life do you need God to come in and renovate because you are insufficient to fix yourself? Where do you need the one who really values you to come in and rip down with a sledgehammer and take out things in your life and restore you to what you've always been meant to be? Where do you have deep, deep wounds that you don't want to confront? Where do you have those that you need God to shed light on?
You bring restoration. You bring restoration.
So now that you've identified those things, now that I've seen that you sat back and taken a second to take inventory of what's going on, or maybe you're going to need to do that throughout this week, and when you have that chance to do that, I need you to do two things. Peter's restoration happened in two ways. First, it was an honest conversation with God. Jesus was God in the flesh and had an honest conversation with him, where Peter was restored. And so it was a confession to God, a moment with him and God, where he had a private confession of, I love you, and God was able to say, okay, go feed my sheep. But there was a second element. The Bible tells us there was more than one disciple there. In fact, Peter didn't write this down. The disciple John wrote this down. So other people knew about Peter's big mess up. Other people were there. The other disciples were there with Peter. So Peter didn't only have a confession with God, he had a confession and a restoration that took place in front of others publicly. Are you trying to go through and fix those wounds, just you and God? Because God wants you to invite other people in as well. So what's going on, and what are those deep hurts or those deep mess-ups that either are self-inflicted or caused by others, that as you're being renovated, you're noticing are big mess-ups in your life? I'm going to share mine with you, because I never think it's fair if I ask you to do something I'm not willing to do. As I've sat back and looked at the renovations happening in my life, I realize how desperately I want people to think I'm competent, that I know what I'm doing. And so I struggle and I try so hard to look the part, and I try so hard to know what I'm saying and try to get people to understand and value my opinion. I want people to hear me and think I'm this great person, or that I have an opinion worth giving, or that they need me in the moment. And I try to be needed so bad, and I need to be wanted. I need to be needed. And when I'm not needed and I'm not wanted, the worst parts of me come out. And when my kids don't listen to me and don't heed my advice, I get angry and I build up, and it's not good. And when my wife makes me feel maybe not needed or wanted at a moment, I don't treat her very well. And when I'm at work and I feel that way, or when I'm with my family and I feel that way, I'm not doing so hot. And so I have to come to other people and have them come around me and talk to my friends and say, hey, guys, this is what I'm going through, and this is what I'm realizing is going on in my life. Can you pray with me? Can you walk alongside me in that? And I have to go to God and I have to say, God, I can't fix this on my own. I desperately need you. And what's awesome about God is God has that perfect love for us, even though our love is many times conditional for him. And he says, yes, I'll come in and I'll make you a new creation. I'll make you better than you ever thought you would be. Are you willing to let God in today, to do the work in you that needs to be done?
You bring restoration to my soul. You bring restoration.
Parents of children, be sure to check out the Kids Church video online via the app or the website. There are so many ways to stay connected and get plugged in during this season. Be sure to check out the calendar to see what's happening, including daily devotionals, online life groups, prayer groups, and so much more.
And now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all, now and forever. Amen.